questions we were grappling with is understanding how growth management issues can affect long-term displacement, as well as housing issues. And I just leave that as an open question for the panelists and for the audience and in general. We've seen problems that occurred with Katrina and long-term displacement, whether growth management legislation contributes to reducing such long-term displacement, or whether it doesn't have much of a role to play in that in terms of urban boundaries. So I'll end with that, and thank you.
Thank you. Well, we had quite a lot of information shared, and I know you have questions. We also had thought we might talk about the future direction. But we also have Tom later on this evening at the Performing Arts Center speaking specifically in that subject at the John Rhodes Scholar speech. So I want to have some questions, but I also want to give time to submit give a teaser for his speech, a short teaser, because I want you to all stay for the rest of the event. We're going to then take some questions and go right downstairs. Tom, any concluding remarks or thoughts to frame your thoughts later this evening?
I think this discussion, which certainly has been rich with a lot of information, demonstrates how difficult it is to evaluate our system. Lack of consensus about the goals and what we're trying to achieve, a lack of agreement about the appropriate methodology to be used in evaluation. And of course, it doesn't really get to the ultimate question, notwithstanding the deficiencies of the system, where would we be if we had never adopted it to begin with, which is something that's even more difficult to evaluate. But I think as difficult as it is to try to evaluate, it's essential that we do, because really the question we're faced with that's even more important today is, do we have the right system in place now to deal with the additional 18 million people that we're projected to have over the next 3 or 4 decades? That's really the question, and I think that's why these exercises are valuable, because they can help us figure out, hopefully, how we can improve the system.
Thank you. Questions? No questions? Yes, ma'am.
I'm Joan Ellsner, and I'm here for the Palm Beach County League of Women Voters. And I would like to address the question to, I'm sorry, didn't hear your name, from DCA, the
Secretary Pelham.
Yes. First of all, I don't know who in the state government would be responsible for a mitigation program for the schools that act as hurricane shelters, especially for those that were designated for disabled people. That turned out to be a disaster, because I know, well, I don't know, but it looks like it could turn out that the budget for education will be cut, and I don't know whose responsibility it is, but and the second thing is, could the DCA do more if they had a bigger budget?
Yes. Some people might not want us to be able to do more. The Division of Emergency Management, located loosely speaking in the Department of Community Affairs, is responsible for the state's major mitigation efforts. They do work in conjunction with planners and other divisions of the department to work on things like mitigation plans, hazard management. I would think that at a state level, that unit would have information for you regarding schools. Ultimately, I don't know whether this is a state or local or school district responsibility, but I would suggest that you start with the Division of Emergency Management.
Any questions? Yes.
Well, I was fascinated by your analysis of the chapters and feel a need to read the book now. In that, to summarize it, I would say that most of you did on the one hand this and on the other hand that, typical of the two armed economists, and that you also sort of dodged the real question, which we're here today to answer. Is the state better off for having the Growth Management Act or not? And so I would like to ask each of you to give us a yes, no answer, and then allow, Jim, you can allow them one sentence to expand on their yes or no.
Doesn't matter what the planning process is.
I'm going to say yes, because I think some planning is better than no planning, and that some, especially when it comes to hazard mitigation planning, I think that's even more so the case.
I also would say yes, mainly because places that have no interest or conception of or see any need to do any planning are now doing planning. We brought the quality of planning up in the state so that it's truly a national leader, sort of the capacity in the state, and I believe that has yielded better outcomes.
I would have to say yes, but with the provision that there's more work to be done, and I think that's really the message of the book, that there are, although it was a great legislation at the outset and it's evolved over time, the growth, it permitted the growth of the state, perhaps in directions that some of us would not like to have seen, but I think that only points us toward the direction of doing more research and getting better tools to manage growth into the future. So ultimately yes, but I think even more planning needs to be done and better planning.
I would say yes for a consistency, mixed for a concurrency and compact development, so and so. Yes, great success in creative policies. No intergovernmental process. The implementation tool since the early 90s, I would say no. And this is the biggest thing I suggest we have to work on.
Absolutely yes, and I say that for this reason. Florida's growth has continued at pretty much the same rate for several decades. If you look at the way in which that growth occurred before 1985 and you compare it with the way it's occurred after 1985, to me there's absolutely no question that we're better off after 1985 than we were before. We do not get all of the what we now consider to be antiquated subdivisions, the Lehigh Acres, the Cape Corals, the general development type developments that we got before 1985. So we have improved, but I agree that we have to do even better in the coming decades.
I second that, yes. Next question. Yes, right here. Would you just stand up unless make it easier for everybody?
I guess my question is, would the panel agree that, and I'm glad to see there's a person from DOT because they're often left out of planning. Would you agree that transportation is the single largest driver, I guess, in sprawl, compact, how a city, where jobs are, where, the whole planning, so to speak, and looking at the FEC corridor here, obviously.
Anybody want to?
And maybe have it backwards. Maybe DOT are the planners and DCA is the sort of onlookers. As the only person who didn't answer yes before, I want to reiterate that I don't think the planning, I think the planning is important. I'm just not convinced that any particular system is any better than any other system. But I think, and maybe you want to say something.
You're a defendant,
I get 40.